Please buy my bicycle, ma'am. My mom hasn't eaten in 2 days. The voice came from behind Maya Williams like a whisper too fragile for the afternoon sundae. She stopped mid-step, one hand still clutching a brown paper bag filled with groceries for her employer. The street was quiet, the kind of suburban calm that belonged to neat hedges, polished mailboxes, and people who pretended not to see what they didn't want to. But Maya turned. On the curb stood a little girl, no more than 6, her blonde hair tangled, her shoes scuffed, and her dress too clean for how tired her face looked. Beside her was a small pink bicycle with a white basket, a cardboard sign taped to the handlebars. For sale. Maya's breath caught. The words felt heavier than they should. "Did you say your mother hasn't eaten?" she asked softly, walking closer. The girl nodded, her chin trembling. 2 days, she said. "I'm trying to help. Mommy said God helps those who help themselves." Maya crouched down so their eyes met. The girl's name tag stitched crookedly on her little sweater read, Amira. Her hands were dirty, the kind of dirt that comes from not having enough soap, not enough time. Behind her, under the shade of an oak tree, a woman sat slumped against the trunk, wrapped in a thin blanket despite the warm Georgia air. Even from this distance, Maya could see her pallor, the fragile rise and fall of her chest. "Is that your mother?" The girl nodded. "She said not to bother people. But she's too tired to walk now." Maya hesitated. The sun pressed on her back, the grocery bag growing heavy in her hand. She could almost hear Mrs. Gaines's voice in her head, stern, precise, always reminding her to be punctual and invisible. But this wasn't something she could walk past. She placed the bag on the sidewalk, reached into her purse, and found the only cash she had left, a 20 and 2 5s. She handed them to the child. "Here, sweetheart. Keep your bike. It's too nice to sell." Amira shook her head. "No, ma'am. I can't just take it." Maya smiled faintly. "Then let's call it a trade. You give me that beautiful smile of yours, and I give you this." The girl's lips curved up barely, but it was enough to pierce something deep inside Maya's chest. She walked with Amira toward the tree. As they approached, the woman stirred. Her face came into focus, and Maya froze. "Clara?" The name slipped out before she could stop it. Clara blinked, her eyes slow to recognize. Then they widened. "Maya?" She tried to sit up, but her strength gave way. Maya dropped to her knees beside her, setting down the food bag. "Lord have mercy," she whispered. "What happened to you?" Clara's voice was hoarse, barely above a breath. "I didn't think you'd remember me. Of course I do. You worked in the kitchen, at the Gaines house." Clara nodded weakly. "Worked. Past tense. They said you quit." Clara's laugh was dry, bitter. "That's what they always say." Maya didn't push further. She opened the grocery bag and pulled out a loaf of bread, some deli meat, a bottle of lemonade. Amira's eyes brightened as Maya spread everything out like a picnic. "You shouldn't," Clara murmured. "They'll notice what's missing. Then I'll say I dropped it." Maya tore the bread in half and handed it over. Clara's hands trembled as she ate. The sound of her chewing, slow, painful, filled the silence. Maya looked away to keep her eyes from stinging. Cars passed, but none slowed down. People glanced, then looked away. "You don't live far from here, do you?" Maya asked after a while. Clara shook her head. "Nowhere to go. They took my last paycheck. Said there were deductions for supplies. Supplies I never saw." "Harold?" Maya's voice hardened without meaning to. "His assistant," Clara whispered. "He just smiled, said it was business." Maya remembered the photo in the dining room, the CEO in his tailored suit, arm around his wife, a grin too white to be real. Harold Gaines. The man whose house she scrubbed spotless every morning. The man who told reporters he believed in family values. Maya looked down at the little girl beside her, now nibbling bread with quiet focus. Amira's hair caught the sunlight, turning strands of gold into fire. "How long have you been out here?" 3 nights, Clara said. "Tried the shelter, but they were full." Her voice cracked. "I didn't want Amira to see me beg." Maya reached into the bag again, handing over the rest of the groceries. You'll need this more than anyone in that house does, she said. I'll come back tomorrow. Clara shook her head. You can't. He'll fire you. Then he'll fire me, Maya replied simply. She stood, brushing dirt from her uniform. But I won't stand by and watch you starve. Amira looked up at her, eyes wide. Are you an angel? The question took Maya by surprise. She laughed softly. No, baby. I'm just a woman who's tired of bad men getting away with things. Amira tilted her head. Mommy says the world's full of people who pretend to be good. Maya thought of Harold's smile, of his wife's empty eyes at dinner parties, of the way staff disappeared without notice. Your mom's right, she said quietly, but sometimes, pretending stops and someone has to notice. As she walked back toward the mansion, the sun began to set, staining the sky the color of bruised peaches. Her shoes clicked against the pavement, each step heavier than the last. The image of the cardboard sign burned in her mind. For sale. It wasn't just about a bike. It was about everything the world had taken from people like Clara and people like her. The front gates of the Gaines estate loomed ahead, black iron against the orange sky. When she entered, the smell of jasmine filled the air, too sweet to be real. Mrs. Gaines stood on the porch, arms folded. You're late, she said. I know, ma'am. No excuses. Dinner's at 7. Mr. Gaines has guests. Maya nodded, lowering her gaze. She moved past her employer and into the gleaming kitchen, the countertops shining like silver mirrors. The contrast between this house and the tree she'd just left was unbearable. She opened the fridge rows of untouched food, imported cheeses, fruits arranged like artwork. Her hands tightened around the handle. In the reflection, she saw her own eyes dark, tired, but burning now with something else. Resolve. Upstairs, she could hear laughter, Harold's deep, booming voice rehearsing charm for his guests. Maya looked down at her uniform, then at the breadcrumbs still clinging to her fingers. Replaceable, she muttered, recalling the word she'd seen on Clara's file before the woman vanished. It echoed in her head like a curse. She knew now she wasn't meant to just pass through this house, cleaning the floors and keeping her head down. Not after what she'd seen today. The city lights flickered on outside as dusk deepened, the cicadas beginning their nighttime song. Somewhere across town, Clara and Amira were probably falling asleep under that same oak tree. Their bellies finally full, but their future uncertain. Maya turned off the kitchen light and stood there in the dark for a long time. She didn't pray she'd done that too often without answers. Instead, she whispered to the quiet room, "If no one else will speak, I will." And though the house remained silent, she swore she heard something stir like the faint rustle of wings, or maybe just the sound of justice beginning to wake. Chapter 2 began not with a sound, but with a scent faint, smoky, and familiar. Maya stood in the kitchen the next morning, inhaling the slow burn of percolating coffee and the buttery aroma of fresh croissants. It was 5:47 a.m., long before the staff was expected to be fully awake, and even longer before the Gaines family would grace the granite island with their polite, cold chatter. She was early, on purpose. She had barely slept. Her dreams, when they came, were fractured things. Flashes of Amira's two old eyes, of Clara's shaking hands, of the word replaceable, carved into her memory like a scar. As Maya poured coffee into a travel mug, her fingers lingered on the ceramic. The house around her hummed in its usual silence. Marble floors, spotless windows, cabinets that clicked instead of creaked. But she felt the weight of everything she had seen yesterday pressed deep into her spine. She had crossed a line, and now there was no going back. Maya? The voice startled her. She turned to find Mrs. O'Connell standing in the doorway. The older woman, in her 60s, wore her signature pressed uniform and gray bun-like armor. She had worked for the Gaines family for over 20 years, and Maya had always sensed something strong beneath her gentility. That strength now flickered in the way Mrs. O'Connell's eyes scanned Maya's face, then lowered to the mug in her hand. "You're early," she said. "So are you," Maya replied. Mrs. O'Connell gave a slow nod. "Couldn't sleep either, huh?" Maya hesitated, then said, "I saw Clara yesterday." The older woman's hand stilled on the countertop. She blinked, her expression unreadable. "She's not well," Maya added, "living on the street. Her daughter's selling her bike to buy food." Mrs. O'Connell exhaled slowly, like someone blowing out a candle. "That poor woman. They said she quit." "She didn't," the older woman said flatly. Maya's eyes narrowed. "You knew?" "I suspected. The day she was let go, she came to say goodbye." She looked broken, Maya, like someone who'd been gutted from the inside out. But she said nothing, just that she hoped God would forgive them. Them. Maya didn't need names. She could already feel the cold smile of Harold Gaines behind those 3 letters. "Why didn't you say something?" Maya asked quietly. Mrs. O'Connell leaned against the counter, her eyes shadowed by regret. "Because in this house, the truth gets you fired. Or worse. I've seen too many girls disappear after speaking up. Clara wasn't the first." Maya tightened her grip around the mug. "Then she'll be the last." The older woman studied her. "You're planning something. I'm not sure yet, but I can't pretend I didn't see what I saw." Mrs. O'Connell nodded slowly, then reached into her apron pocket and slid something across the counter, a small key. "This opens the archive drawer in the old office. No one's used that room since Mr. Gaines moved his files to the study upstairs, but some records were never moved." Maya stared at the key, her heart hammering. "Why are you helping me?" "Because I should have helped Clara when I had the chance," Mrs. O'Connell said. "Because I have 2 granddaughters who'll enter the world soon, and I don't want them growing up thinking silence is the safest choice." Later that morning, Maya slipped into the unused office. It smelled of dust and leather, with sunlight streaming in through narrow windows. The desk was old-fashioned, heavy oak with tarnished brass handles. She inserted the key into the bottom drawer and turned it. A soft click. The drawer creaked open. Inside were stacks of manila folders, some labeled in neat handwriting, others with fading ink. Maya's fingers trembled as she pulled them out one by one, names of former employees she remembered in passing. Maria H., Janice R., Clara D. She found Clara's file, thicker than the rest. A printed termination form. A note in red ink. Failure to comply with standards. Attached was a typed incident report, dated 2 days before Clara's last shift. The complaint? Theft of kitchen supplies and misconduct. Beneath that, Maya saw a copy of Clara's signature, but the loops in the letters looked off, almost traced. Maya's stomach turned. It was a setup. She flipped to the last page. A receipt for special event catering, $300 in unauthorized charges billed to Clara's name. It was signed not by Clara, but by someone else entirely. And Maya recognized the initials. S.T. Sandra Turner, Harold's assistant. The woman who always wore red lipstick and thinly veiled contempt for the rest of the staff. Footsteps outside snapped Maya back into the present. She slid the folder under her sweater and quietly shut the drawer. She moved out just as Mr. Gaines's heavy voice echoed from the hallway. "She's always punctual, that one," he was saying to someone. "I like discipline. Makes things easier to manage." Maya didn't stop walking until she reached the back patio. She stood in the shade of the ivy-covered wall, heart pounding, fingers still pressed against the stolen file. Later that day, she walked to the corner park near the bus stop. Clara was still there, though sitting more upright now. Amira was playing with a piece of sidewalk chalk, drawing crooked hearts on the concrete. Maya sat beside Clara and handed her the folder. "What's this?" Clara asked. "Proof," Maya said. "They framed you." Clara opened the file with trembling hands. Her eyes moved over the pages slowly. When she got to the signature, she froze. "I never signed this," she whispered. "I know." Tears welled in Clara's eyes. "I thought maybe I deserved it. I spoke up. I pushed back. And they made me believe I was nothing." "You're not," Maya said, "and we're going to fix this." Man, if you feel the same pain and courage that Maya showed, hit the like button to stand with people who fight for what's right. And comment where you're watching this video from. Who knows, maybe someone near you is watching this story too. Clara closed the folder and hugged it to her chest like a lifeline. "Why are you helping me?" Maya looked over at Amira, who now waved from a patch of sunlit grass. "Because your daughter thinks I'm an angel," she said, "and I'm not going to be the one who proves her wrong." The night had folded itself over Savannah like an old wool blanket, thick, warm, and weighed down with secrets. Maya stood on the narrow back porch of her apartment, staring out at the quiet alley behind the building. A single porch light flickered above her, attracting moths that buzzed and danced around the dim glow. She sipped from a chipped mug of peppermint tea, the warmth a small comfort against the chill that had settled in her chest. She hadn't told anyone what she'd done that day. Not Mrs. O'Connell, not Clara, not even the woman at the church who sometimes asked if she needed prayer. The file she'd found in the archives was now tucked safely beneath a loose floorboard under her bed. But the more important truth, the one that refused to let her sleep, was this. Harold Gaines wasn't just a liar. He was a man protected by silence, reputation, and money. And she had cracked that armor, just a little. Inside, the apartment was quiet. Her son, Jordan, was asleep in the next room. His lanky teenage body sprawled across the twin mattress like a boy still growing into the idea of manhood. She'd called him earlier, promised to send more money next week. He'd said he missed her, and then, as always, changed the subject to sports or school. That was his way of protecting her, keeping things light so she wouldn't worry. But Maya worried anyway, every day. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. One new message. Unknown number. I have more. Meet me at Monroe Park, 6 a.m., near the fountain. No name, no emojis, just that. Maya stared at the screen. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, but she didn't reply. Instead, she memorized the message, then deleted it. By 5:30 the next morning, she was on the move. The sun hadn't yet crested the horizon, and Monroe Park was still wrapped in a sleepy haze. The fountain sat like a forgotten centerpiece, its marble edges chipped from years of use. Pigeons fluttered nearby, pecking at crumbs that weren't there. Maya pulled her coat tighter around her and waited. At exactly 6:02, a figure approached. She recognized him immediately. Desmond Carr, former groundskeeper at the Gaines estate. He'd vanished 3 months ago without warning. No goodbye, no explanation. Rumor had it he'd stolen tools, maybe even money. But Maya hadn't believed it then. And she didn't now. Desmond looked thinner, harder around the eyes, like life had taken a few more swipes at him since they last met. "You came," he said. "You sent the message?" He nodded. "I didn't know who else would believe me." Maya gestured to the bench beside her. "Talk." Desmond sat, elbows resting on his knees. "They made it look like I took things. Tools went missing. Cameras accidentally stopped working. Then I get called in, and Harold's standing there with Sandra, saying I can either sign a confession or face charges. What choice did I have?" "You didn't steal anything." "No." He looked at her, eyes burning. "But you know what I did do? I saw Clara crying in the garden 2 days before she got fired. I saw Harold corner her. I couldn't hear everything, but I saw how she looked after, like she was trying not to fall apart." Maya felt a knot twist in her stomach. "Did you ever tell anyone?" "Who would listen? Everyone's too afraid of losing their job." Maya pulled the folder from her bag, the one with Clara's falsified termination papers. She laid it on the bench between them. Desmond flipped through it in silence. "This is good," he said. "But it's not enough. You need someone outside the house. Someone who can run with this. I'm working on it." "No." He glanced at her sideways. "You ever heard of Jules Hawkins?" Maya blinked. "The journalist?" "Yeah. He used to be a bulldog. The kind who wouldn't back down. Then something happened. I don't know, divorce maybe. Anyway, he still freelances. If you can get this to him, and I mean in person, he might bite." Maya nodded slowly. "You know where to find him?" Desmond smirked. "He drinks at Tully's pub, Tuesday nights. Like clockwork." "Dodo." They sat in silence for a moment, the wind brushing dry leaves across the stone. Maya thought of Clara curled up beneath that oak tree. Thought of Amira, guarding her pink bicycle like it was the last thing in the world she owned. Thought of the man in the big house who wore decency like a tailored suit. "You doing okay?" she asked Desmond. He chuckled bitterly. "I'm surviving. But I haven't had steady work in months. You know how it is." "I do." They rose together. Desmond reached into his coat and pulled out a crumpled envelope. "There's one more thing. Found this the day before I left. It's a copy of a check made out to Harold's personal foundation, but from the house's food budget. Guess who approved it?" "Sandra." "Bingo. Maya took the envelope with both hands. It felt like holding a key, small, fragile, but powerful. Thank you. Desmond looked at her, long and quiet. Whatever you're about to do, be careful. They don't play fair. I know, Maya said. But I'm not playing anymore. I'm telling the truth. He nodded once and walked away, shoulders hunched against the morning cold. By the time Maya returned to the Gaines house, the sun was rising, spilling golden light over the white picket fences and flower beds. She slipped in through the back door just as the housekeeper arrived, humming softly and unaware. Maya headed to the pantry, past the polished countertops, the gleaming silverware, and the quiet that covered the house like a secret. She placed the new evidence in the same floorboard, hiding the rest. Then she stood in front of the mirror above the kitchen sink. Her reflection stared back, calm, steady, and ready. "You're not replaceable," she whispered. By the time evening stretched its amber fingers across the Savannah sky, Maya had already spent the entire day moving through the Gaines mansion like a ghost. She scrubbed, dusted, folded, and smiled when spoken to, but every moment, her mind pulsed with a single thought. Tonight. Tonight she would go to Tully's pub and meet Jules Hawkins. The house was unusually quiet that afternoon. Mrs. Gaines was out with friends. Harold had locked himself in his study, and the staff had retreated to their quarters. Only Mrs. O'Connell remained in the kitchen, stirring a pot of soup that smelled faintly of thyme and roasted chicken. The radio on the counter murmured a slow blues tune. "You've been quiet today," Mrs. O'Connell said, not looking up. "Quiet isn't always good." Maya wiped her hands on her apron. "Just thinking. That's the dangerous kind of quiet." The older woman glanced at her, eyes narrowing with knowing affection. "You're planning something." Maya hesitated, then smiled. "Maybe I am." Mrs. O'Connell ladled soup into a small bowl and handed it to her. "Whatever it is, eat first. Justice runs better on a full stomach." The words made Maya laugh, soft but genuine. She took the bowl and sat near the window overlooking the manicured garden. The sun was setting, turning the magnolia trees into silhouettes. Somewhere beyond those trees, on the other side of town, Clara and Amira were waiting unseen but never forgotten. At 6:30, Maya changed out of her uniform. She wore jeans, a denim jacket, and a faded scarf. It felt strange, being herself again. She caught her reflection in the hallway mirror, simple, steady, unremarkable, and whispered, "Let's finish this." Tully's pub sat on a corner 2 blocks from the river. It was the kind of place that smelled of wood, smoke, and history, with faded photographs of sailors, jazz bands, and long-dead regulars hanging crookedly on the walls. The neon sign outside buzzed weakly. Tully's, since 1952. Inside, the air was thick with the sound of clinking glasses and low conversation. Maya spotted him immediately. Jules Hawkins sat at the far end of the bar, hunched over a notebook, a half-empty glass of bourbon by his hand. His hair was silver at the temples, his suit wrinkled, and his eyes tired but alert, the eyes of a man who'd seen too much and believed too little. Maya approached slowly. "Mr. Hawkins." He turned, sizing her up. "Depends. Who's asking?" "My name's Maya Williams. I work for Harold Gaines." That got his attention. He straightened slightly. "You've got about 10 seconds before I decide if this is worth my drink." Maya placed the folder on the bar between them. "It's about Clara Dorsey, and 5 other women who lost their jobs for reasons that don't exist." He didn't touch the folder at first, just stared at it, then at her. "You're serious?" "I'm standing in a bar at night when I should be home asleep. I'm serious." He opened the folder, his brows furrowed as he flipped through the pages, the falsified reports, the fake receipts, the signature that wasn't Clara's. "You stole these?" "I borrowed them from the truth," Maya said. Jules's lips twitched, almost a smile. "Lady, you've got goots." "I've got a conscience," she replied. He leaned back, exhaling slowly. "You understand what happens if we go public with this? Gaines is connected. He's got lawyers who eat people like us for breakfast." Maya met his gaze steadily. "Then let them choke." That silence that followed wasn't empty, it was heavy, alive. Jules picked up his drink, took a slow sip, and nodded. "All right. Tell me everything." For nearly an hour, Maya talked. About Clara, About Amira, about the money siphoned from the food budget, about Desmond Carr's firing and Sandra Turner's signature. Jules didn't interrupt, only scribbled notes, and asked the occasional question. When she finished, he closed his notebook and said, "This is enough to start something. But I'll need proof beyond the papers, witnesses, dates, anything digital." "I can get that," Maya said. "Careful," Jules warned. "If he catches you, you won't just lose your job, you'll lose your safety." "No," Maya gave a tired smile. "I lost that the moment I found Clara under that tree." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Meet me again in 2 days. Same time. If I find what I need, I'll publish." As she stood to leave, he added quietly, "You remind me of someone." "Who?" "A woman I used to write stories about. They called her the Maid of New Orleans. Stood up to the city council when they tried to evict her church. She won. You know." Maya's eyes softened. "Did she ever get thanked?" "No," Jules said, a faint smile on his lips. "But people remembered." Outside, the night had cooled. The wind carried the scent of rain and the echo of riverboats in the distance. Maya walked down the narrow street, passing shop fronts and flickering street lamps. She felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of direction. Halfway home, her phone buzzed. A new message appeared. "We know what you took." No name, no number, just those words. Maya stopped walking. The street suddenly seemed too quiet, too long. She looked around, nothing but parked cars, and the faint hum of a streetlight. She swallowed hard and kept moving. By the time she reached her apartment, her hands were shaking. She locked the door twice, then went straight to the floorboard under her bed. The folder was still there, safe, but the message lingered like smoke in the air. She sat at the edge of the bed, heart thudding. Outside, a car door slammed, voices murmured, then faded. She waited, listening, until silence returned. Her phone buzzed again this time, a voicemail from Mrs. O'Connell. The older woman's voice was hushed. "Maya, don't come in early tomorrow. Something's wrong. They're asking questions about the office key. I'll cover for you, but be careful." Maya closed her eyes, exhaling shakily. The noose was tightening. She lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun lazily overhead. "Justice doesn't whisper," she murmured. "It waits in silence until someone speaks." And tomorrow, she would speak louder. The morning air tasted metallic, sharp with tension. Maya stood at the sink in her kitchen, watching the coffee drip slowly into the pot, one dark drop after another. Her eyes were red-rimmed from a sleepless night, her mind echoing with the voicemail from Mrs. O'Connell. "They're asking questions about the office key." She hadn't replied. There wasn't much to say. She already knew this moment would come. As she buttered a piece of toast for Jordan, who was still asleep in the next room, her thoughts kept circling back to the message on her phone the night before. "We know what you took." It hadn't said who "we" was, but Maya didn't need to ask. In a house like the Gaines estate, there was always someone watching, even if you couldn't see the eyes. She pulled out her phone and opened the audio recording app. She'd downloaded it the week before, but hadn't used it until now. She hit record and slipped the phone into her jacket pocket. "Let them hear what they want," she thought. "Let them know I'm not afraid to speak." At 7:35 a.m., Maya stood outside the back gate of the Gaines property. She watched the landscaper's truck pull away, its tires kicking dust into the pale dawn light. The smell of freshly mown grass mixed with the citrusy perfume of the hedgerows. Everything looked the same, but it wasn't. Mrs. O'Connell met her at the side door. Her face was pale, mouth drawn tight like a pulled thread. She said nothing, just nodded toward the laundry room. Inside, Maya followed her silently. Once the door shut behind them, Mrs. O'Connell spoke in a low whisper. "They found the drawer open yesterday afternoon. Sandra threw a fit. She says someone's tampered with personnel records." Maya didn't blink. "Did they check the footage?" Mrs. O'Connell nodded. "It just so happened the cameras were down. Again. Of course they were. That was Sandra's favorite trick, disable the evidence, then fabricate the rest. She's going to pin it on someone," Mrs. O'Connell added. "You know that, right?" Maya nodded. "That's why I need to move faster." "I still don't understand," Mrs. O'Connell whispered, her eyes glistening. "Why are you doing this? You could just walk away. Maya hesitated. She didn't say Clara. She didn't say Amira. She didn't say, because I was them once. Instead, she just said, because someone has to. Mrs. O'Connell squeezed her hand briefly, then turned and left the room. Maya knew what had to come next. She needed a confession, or at least something close. That meant confronting Sandra Turner. By mid-morning, Maya waited until the second floor was empty. Sandra often spent this time between 10 and 10, 30 inches the sunroom reviewing invoices real and otherwise. Maya timed her steps, walking with purpose down the carpeted hallway, each step muffled like a secret. She knocked gently on the sunroom door. "Come in," Sandra called. The room was awash with golden light, the glass walls gleaming like a jewel box. Sandra sat in a wingback chair, tablet in hand, her red lipstick perfectly applied, her expression cool and unbothered. "Maya," she said without looking up, "I don't believe you're scheduled to clean this room today." Maya kept her voice steady. "I'm not here to clean. I wanted to ask you something." Sandra finally looked up. Her smile was thin. "Is this about your hours? You'll need to speak with HR. It's not about my hours. It's about Clara Dorsey." The smile vanished. Maya watched the shift in Sandra's eyes, a flicker of recognition, then a calculated stillness. "I was told she resigned," Maya continued. "But I've seen her, living on the street, with her child. That doesn't look like someone who resigned." Sandra's voice was silk wrapped around steel. "You're out of line." "Am I?" Maya took one step closer, because from where I'm standing, it looks like Clara was framed. Like someone used her name to sign off on fake charges. Like someone moved money under her name to cover up theft. Sandra stood, slowly. "You're making dangerous assumptions. I'm making educated guesses, with evidence." Sandra crossed her arms. "I don't know what you think you're doing. But if you're trying to intimidate me..." "I'm not," Maya cut in. "I'm trying to give you a chance." Sandra's brows rose. "A chance? To do the right thing. To admit you falsified records. To admit you forged Clara's signature. Before this goes public." For a moment, the two women stared at each other, one built by power and privilege, the other forged by survival. Then Sandra chuckled. "You think anyone's going to believe you over me? A maid with no legal standing, no degree, no last name anyone knows." Maya reached into her jacket pocket and pressed stop on the audio recorder. "Maybe not," she said, "but I think they'll believe you." Sandra froze. Maya pulled the phone out, screen still glowing. "And I think this little conversation will go great in front of a jury." "You're bluffing." Maya played back the last 30 seconds. Sandra's voice was unmistakable. "You think anyone's going to believe you over me?" Sandra's lips parted slightly. Her eyes narrowed. "You're going to regret this." Maya stared at her without blinking. "No, I think I'll regret not doing it." She turned and walked out, pulse pounding, breath shallow. Her legs shook as she descended the stairs, but her grip on the phone was steady. She didn't stop until she reached the garden. There, under the shade of the same tree where she had once seen Clara working, Maya sat down on a stone bench. The sun filtered through the leaves above her, casting dappled light on the grass. The house behind her was still. For now. She took a deep breath, pulled out Jules Hawkins's number, and hit call. He answered on the second ring. "You got something?" "I have a recording," Maya said. "It's not a confession, but it's arrogance. And that's close enough." There was a pause. Then Jules said, "That'll do. Let's blow the whole damn thing open." The next 24 hours moved like thunderclouds, slow, building, electric. Maya didn't go back to the Gaines house the next morning. Mrs. O'Connell had left a whispered message on her voicemail just after sunrise. "Stay away today. There are meetings. Something's brewing." Maya didn't need to be told twice. She knew what was coming. Her conversation with Sandra Turner had lit a fuse, and now the whole house was waiting for it to reach the powder keg. She spent the morning in the small back room of the local library, hunched over a worn oak desk, reviewing everything with Jules Hawkins. The journalist looked tired, his button-up shirt slightly wrinkled, his fingers stained with ink and coffee. But his mind was razor-sharp. "This recording helps," he said, gesturing toward the phone Maya had placed on the desk. It shows attitude, arrogance, the kind that juries hate. But not enough, Maya said. Not yet, Jules agreed. We need one more thing. Something to tie Sandra directly to the forged signature. You said there was a check? Maya nodded. Desmond gave me a copy, but I haven't verified the bank trail. Jules leaned back in his chair. If we can prove she moved company money into Harold's personal foundation, under Clara's name, that's fraud. Real fraud. Not just moral rot. Maya looked down at her hands. Clara deserves to see justice with her own eyes. Jules nodded slowly. She will. But Maya, you need to be careful now. If they suspect what you're doing, they already do. He studied her. You scared? Yes, she said plainly. But fear's never been a good enough reason for me to stop. That afternoon, Jules made arrangements for the check to be traced. He had a contact, a former financial auditor who owed him a favor and had no love for corporate corruption. They would have an answer in 48 hours. Until then, Maya would wait. And watching meant returning to the very place where the lie had begun. By 4 p.m., she stood outside the black iron gates of the Gaines estate, her uniform crisp, her bag heavier than usual. Inside were copies of everything: the audio recording, the original folder, the check image, her notes, hidden deep in a hidden pocket of her tote. The gate buzzed open. As she walked up the path, the house loomed larger than usual, its columns casting long shadows across the lawn. It didn't feel like a home anymore, it felt like a fortress. Inside, the mood was colder. Staff nodded at her without smiles. Mrs. Gaines didn't acknowledge her in the hallway. But Maya didn't care. She wasn't there for pleasantries. Sandra was in the study. Maya heard her voice through the door, sharp, clipped, calculated. She's not just a liability, Sandra was saying to someone. She's a threat. Maya moved quickly to the pantry and began stacking linens, her ears tuned to every sound. Harold's voice came next, lower but clear. If she's got something, it'll leak. Hawkins has a reputation. He won't let it go. I can take care of it, Sandra replied. Let me dig into her file. If there's anything in her past, we'll bury her before she opens her mouth. Maya froze. They were going after her now. Not with violence, with ruin. She left the pantry and headed straight to Mrs. O'Connell. The older woman was in the back corridor, folding napkins with robotic precision. They're planning to destroy me, Maya said. They're going to smear my name. Mrs. O'Connell's hands paused mid-fold. Then we move faster. Maya raised an eyebrow. We? The woman looked at her. I may not have spoken before, but I'm not going to watch them do it again. We'll finish what you started. Together, they made a plan. Maya would act as if nothing had changed. Keep her head down. Keep her routine. But every spare moment would be spent gathering the digital breadcrumbs Jules needed: employee schedules, security logs, scanned pay stubs. Mrs. O'Connell would distract Sandra, guiding her attention elsewhere with small, intentional problems, missing receipts, misplaced invoices. Little storms to keep her busy while Maya moved under the radar. The next day, while Sandra fought with a delivery vendor in the front office, Maya slipped into the HR room on the second floor. She didn't have the password for the desktop, but she didn't need it. Mrs. O'Connell had written it on a napkin. Inside the computer were files, hundreds of them, organized in cold, alphabetical order. Maya found Clara's folder, then Desmond's, then her own. She opened hers first and stopped breathing. There, in bold red letters across the top of the file, watch list. Behavior under review. Below it, an internal memo. MW has shown signs of insubordination. Unverified allegations suggest she has made contact with terminated employee CD. Possible collaboration with media. Monitor closely. Her heart pounded as she took a photo of the screen. Then she opened the Gaines Foundation files. That's where she found it. A scanned PDF. A $2,500 check labeled Employee Bonus Reimbursement. It had Clara's name. But in the metadata, at the very bottom, was the file creator, S. Turner. It was the smoking gun. She transferred the file to a flash drive hidden inside a lipstick tube. then logged off and left without looking back. That night, she met Jules behind the church on Lafayette Street. The journalist took the drive, plugged it into his laptop, and stared. "You've got it," he whispered. "This is it. This ties her name to the forged payment." He looked up at Maya. "We're going live tomorrow. I'll file with 3 newswires. Online, radio, maybe even local TV if I can push hard enough." Maya's throat tightened. "You think it'll matter?" "Oh, it'll matter," Jules said. "Not just for Clara, or you, but for every maid, janitor, assistant, and invisible worker they thought they could crush." The bells of the old church rang once, and Maya, standing under the yellow light of the street lamp, finally let herself believe. The story broke just after dawn. At exactly 6:03 a.m., Maya sat on the worn sofa in her apartment, wrapped in a fleece blanket, her eyes glued to the glowing screen of her old tablet. The headline hit like a thunderclap. "Whistleblower exposes fraud and abuse at prominent Savannah estate housekeeper fired under false charges speaks out." By Jules Hawkins, independent investigative journalist. The article was long, thorough, and relentless. Jules had done it. He had written Clara's truth into permanence, how she was accused of theft without evidence, how her signature was forged to cover embezzlement, and how the money had quietly disappeared into the Gaines Foundation under the authorization of Harold Gaines's own executive assistant, Sandra Turner. The piece included the image of the forged check, metadata highlighted in red. There was no wiggle room, no plausible deniability. And Maya's name was there too, not as the victim, but the voice. The article didn't describe her appearance or background. It simply referred to her as an employee with unwavering courage, who risked everything to ensure the truth was no longer buried beneath white collars and locked filing cabinets. Maya sat frozen. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She simply felt the weight of stillness, like the moment just before the sky breaks into storm. Her phone buzzed. Dozens of notifications. Emails. Unknown numbers. A voicemail from Jules. "It's out. I don't know what happens next, but I'm standing with you. Whatever comes, we don't walk it alone." Maya stood slowly and walked to Jordan's room. He was still asleep, sprawled sideways, one foot hanging off the bed. She sat beside him and smoothed his curls from his forehead. Just watching him breathe, for a minute, made everything else shrink. At 8:10 a.m., her world changed. She got a call from an unlisted number. She answered. "Maya Williams?" a crisp male voice asked. "Yes." "Ryan, this is Detective Roland Perez, Savannah PD. I'm reaching out regarding recent claims published in the press. Are you available to speak in person today?" Her heart jumped. "Yes, I'm available." "Good. We'd like to schedule an interview this afternoon. You'll be accompanied by legal counsel, and your statement will be recorded." "Legal counsel?" she repeated, startled. "Yes," he said. "An attorney named Helen Markham has volunteered pro bono support for you. She's read the article." "Doe?" Maya blinked. Okay, yes, I'll be there." The call ended, and she stood in the center of the kitchen, stunned. Not by fear, but by the realization that people believed her. Mrs. O'Connell called next. Her voice trembled with emotion. "They read it at the staff entrance this morning. Everyone's talking. Harold hasn't come out of his office. Sandra? Gone. Left before sunrise. No one knows where." Maya closed her eyes. "Thank you." "No, Maya," the older woman whispered. "Thank you. You didn't just speak for Clara. You spoke for all of us." At the police precinct that afternoon, the room was clean and cold. Detective Perez was kind but thorough. Helen Markham, tall, composed, with silver-streaked braids and eyes like tempered steel, sat beside Maya the whole time. "You did something very brave," Helen said as they waited for the paperwork. "And very rare." "I didn't feel brave," Maya admitted. "You were," Helen said, gently but firmly. "And now it's our turn." May. Over the next 3 hours, Maya provided everything: timelines, scanned documents, printed messages. She even gave the names of other employees she suspected had been wrongfully terminated or harassed. By the end of the session, the detective's expression had changed from curious to grim. "This isn't just one incident," he said. "This is a pattern." That evening, Maya returned home to a voicemail from Clara. The voice on the other end was tear-choked, breathless. I don't know what to say. I saw it, Maya. I saw it on my daughter's tablet at the shelter. My name. In print. My story. Amira said. Mama. Look, it's you. She smiled. Maya. She smiled. I haven't seen that since the park. Maya held the phone to her chest and let the tears come. At dusk, she walked to the old oak in Monroe Park. Clara was there, holding Amira's hand. The little girl wore a blue sweater far too big for her, but her cheeks were flushed with something warm and alive. Clara stepped forward, opened her arms, and embraced Maya like a sister long lost, and finally returned. I thought I'd never matter again, Clara whispered. You reminded me I still do. Maya knelt before Amira. You were right, she said softly. Your mom didn't do anything wrong. She's the strongest person I know. Amira nodded solemnly, then took something from her pocket, a small folded piece of paper. It was a drawing, crude, bright, drawn in marker. 3 women, 1 child, holding hands beneath a sundae. At the top, in shaky handwriting, my angels. Maya blinked back tears. Later that night, the news anchors said the name Harold Gaines. For the first time, not in admiration, but in question. Terms like misconduct, misuse of funds, and internal investigation began surfacing. The story was spreading. Jules called again. Radio's picking it up. Local stations want to interview you. National outlets may follow. I know it's overwhelming. You okay? Maya looked out the window at the street below, quiet, familiar, still hers. I'm not trying to be famous, she said. I know, Jules replied. You're trying to make it right. And in that moment, she realized she already had. 2 days after the story went live, the world outside Maya's apartment had changed, but inside, her morning routine remained almost ritual. She made coffee in the dented percolator she'd inherited from her mother. She folded Jordan's hoodie and placed it at the end of his bed. She tied her hair back in a loose bun, even though she wasn't going anywhere. It was strange how normal things could feel while your name was dancing through radio airwaves and TV news tickers. By 9 a.m., the phone calls had already started. Local activists, former Gaines employees, church leaders, even a reporter from Atlanta Public Radio asking for an exclusive interview. Maya had said no to most of them, not because she didn't care, but because she didn't want to become a symbol. She wanted change, not attention. Jules had warned her this would happen. People will want your story, not just the facts. Some will twist it, soften it, or use it to make themselves feel better. Hold your ground, Maya. Speak in your own voice, or someone else will speak for you. She didn't fully understand that until she turned on the television. There he was, Harold Gaines, standing stiffly behind a mahogany podium, flanked by lawyers and a PR manager with a permanently furrowed brow. The Gaines Foundation logo loomed behind him like a seal of royalty. This has been a difficult week, he began, voice calm, composed. Allegations have surfaced which we take very seriously. The foundation remains committed to transparency, and an independent audit is underway. However, we caution the public not to rush to judgment based on sensationalized accounts. Rhett, he didn't say her name, he didn't mention Clara's, but Maya heard what he didn't say louder than what he did. He wasn't denying the documents. He wasn't denying the money. He was denying them. That afternoon, Helen Markham, the lawyer who had become an unexpected lifeline, came by Maya's apartment with updates. Police are expanding the investigation, Helen said as she sifted through a stack of folders. They're looking into 5 other terminations, all suspiciously linked to Sandra Turner. It's unraveling. Maya nodded, but her face remained still. Helen studied her for a moment. You're holding something back. I'm tired, Maya admitted, and I feel like they're trying to bury us again, just with nicer language. Helen sat across from her. Do you know what the law really is, Maya? A tool? Maya guessed. Helen smiled faintly. It's a machine, cold, unfeeling, but the people who step up, who testify, who bring truth into it, they're the heat that keeps it moving. Maya exhaled slowly. So what now? Now, Helen said, we fight in public. Later that week, Maya finally agreed to do one interview, just one. It was with a small but respected local podcast, Southern Voices Unfiltered, hosted by a retired professor named Louisa Grant. The studio was humble, tucked between a bookstore and a diner. Louisa herself was in her 60s, warm-eyed, and no stranger to hard truths. When they began recording, Louisa's first question wasn't about Harold. It was about Maya. Who taught you to speak truth when it's risky? Maya paused. My grandmother. She cleaned offices downtown for 40 years. Told me once that mopping a floor doesn't make you small, being afraid to look someone in the eye does. Louisa leaned forward. And when you uncovered what happened to Clara, why not stay quiet like so many others? Maya looked into the microphone like it was a window into every invisible life she'd ever known. Because silence doesn't protect you, it just makes you easier to ignore. She spoke for 30 minutes, clear, direct, with her heart unhidden. She didn't cry, though her voice cracked when she spoke of Clara's daughter, Amira. When she finished, Louisa reached over and squeezed her hand. You didn't just shine a light, Louisa said. You lit a fire. That night, Maya walked past the Gaines estate one last time. It looked different now. Not grand, not powerful, just big, just hollow. A for sale sign had gone up that afternoon, the red letters bold against the white columns. Word had gotten out, donors were pulling funding, the foundation's board was distancing itself, and Sandra Turner was reportedly under formal investigation for fraud and witness intimidation. Justice wasn't fast, but it was walking, and Maya walked with it. She paused beneath the same oak tree where she had once found Clara crying. A breeze stirred the leaves, and for a moment, the rustle sounded like a whisper. Keep going. Maya turned toward the street. At the corner stood a group of women, former employees, familiar faces, some she hadn't seen in months. Desmond was there too, holding a sign that read, "We are not disposable." And Clara, at the front, holding Amira's hand. They didn't say anything. They didn't have to. Maya stepped off the curb and joined them. One by one, more people came. A neighbor, a teacher, a man from the church who had once shared his last $5 with Clara. And as the sun dipped below the rooftops, Maya stood among them not as a maid, not as a martyr, but as a woman who had refused to stay small. Her voice, once hidden behind silence and routine, now echoed through streets and headlines. And it was only just beginning. The morning after the peaceful gathering outside the Gaines estate, Maya woke up to an unexpected knock on her apartment door. It wasn't the nervous knock of a neighbor or the heavy hand of a stranger. It was precise, deliberate, and too early to be casual. She glanced through the peephole. Helen Markham. Maya opened the door, confused. Helen? What? They've filed a lawsuit, Helen said flatly, stepping inside. Gaines's legal team just served a civil defamation suit against you and Jules Hawkins. They're accusing you of slander, conspiracy, and breach of employee confidentiality. Maya blinked. He's suing me? Yes. Helen's tone was sharp but calm, her movements efficient as she laid papers on the kitchen table. He's scared. This isn't about justice. It's about intimidation. Maya's hands trembled as she picked up the legal notice. I did everything right. I told the truth. And that's why they're doing this, Helen said. Because the truth worked. Maya sat slowly. So what now? Am I going to lose everything? Helen sat across from her. No. But we're going to have to fight. This will go public fast. Jules is already preparing his response. But I need you ready. There'll be depositions, interviews, media spin. Maya looked down. I never wanted to be in a courtroom. Helen's voice softened. Most people who belong there never do. May. That afternoon, the lawsuit hit the news. It was everywhere. Gaines countersues whistleblower. Read one headline. Billionaire philanthropist fights back. Read another. The media circus began spinning, and this time, it wasn't all in Maya's favor. The public was divided. Some supported her fiercely, others questioned her motives. A few accused her of trying to take down a good man out of bitterness. It stung, but it didn't break her. Still, it added a new weight to every step, every breath. Jules called from a noisy street corner. It's worse than we thought. He's got a new PR team. They're playing dirty. They're saying you fabricated everything. That you were a disgruntled employee looking for revenge. I expected this, Maya said. though her voice sounded smaller than she wanted. "Well," Jules replied, "they underestimated who you are." "No." 2 days later, Maya found herself in the courthouse for the first time, not in handcuffs, not on trial, but seated beside her lawyer, facing a team of men in suits who didn't see her as a person but as a problem. Harold Gaines sat at the opposite table. He didn't look at her once. His eyes were on the judge, on the reporters, on his attorney, but never on the woman who had scrubbed his floors, who had picked up his son's dropped toys, who had once held his secrets in quiet hands. The judge's voice was calm and clipped. "This hearing is for the preliminary injunction requested by the plaintiff, Mr. Harold Gaines, seeking to halt publication of further information from Miss Maya Williams and Mr. Jules Hawkins pending the outcome of the defamation case." Helen stood. "Your Honor, the public interest in this case is enormous. We are not dealing with gossip. We are dealing with documented fraud, supported by evidence submitted to the state attorney's office. Silencing my client is not justice, it is suppression." The opposing lawyer, gray-haired, polished, with a voice like a practiced preacher, replied, "My client's reputation is being destroyed by half-truths and assumptions. He has given generously to this community for years." The judge turned to Maya. "Miss Williams, do you understand what's at stake here?" Maya stood. Her voice didn't waver. "Yes, Your Honor. But this isn't about Mr. Gaines's reputation. It's about Clara Dorsey, about 6 other women who were fired for nothing, about stolen money and a system that protects power. If that makes people uncomfortable, then maybe they should be." There was silence in the courtroom. Even Harold looked up. The judge nodded. "Understood. The motion to silence further publication is denied. The case may proceed, but the court will not muzzle speech supported by credible documentation." Outside, cameras clicked. Microphones were shoved forward, but Maya kept walking, eyes ahead, shoulders square. Helen was beside her, smiling faintly. "You did well in there. I'm not done yet," Maya said. That evening, Jules published a follow-up. The headline was simple: "You can't sue the truth." It included excerpts from the hearing, quotes from Helen, and a transcript of Maya's courtroom statement. The tide began to shift again. Public opinion started tilting in her favor once more, not out of pity, but out of respect. The next morning, Maya opened her mailbox and found something unexpected. A letter, no return address, just her name, handwritten. Inside, it read, "Miss Williams, I was a groundskeeper for the Gaines estate. They let me go last year. Told me budget cuts. But I saw Sandra Turner shredding papers after Clara was fired. I didn't say anything then, but I want to now. If you need me, I'll testify. Signed only, David J." Maya read it 3 times. Someone else was ready to speak. She called Helen. "We've got a witness, someone new." Helen's voice sharpened. "Then we bring him in. Every truth counts." That night, Maya sat on her porch with Jordan curled beside her, asleep under a thick blanket. The stars above were faint, the air cool, and her heart, though still carrying the bruises of the fight, beat with something solid. Conviction. A knock at the door startled her. It was Clara holding a file folder. "There's more," Clara said. "I remembered something. Amira had drawn on the back of an old form I kept from work. I never looked at it closely." Maya opened the folder. On the back of the paper, in faded ink, was a line item, a misallocated fund, dated 2 days before Clara's termination. Maya looked up. This wasn't over. This was only the beginning of pulling every thread loose until the whole corrupt fabric unraveled. By the following Monday, the case had escalated beyond the quiet corners of Savannah. National outlets began picking it up, not just Jules Hawkins's reporting, but the entire story arc: the billionaire, the maid, the forged documents, the growing list of witnesses. Maya could hardly believe it. CNN called twice. NPR asked for a long-form interview. Even a morning talk show emailed her, requesting a Brave Women segment. She declined them all. "I'm not a headline," she told Jules, who laughed softly on the other end of the line. "No," he said, "you're the paragraph that changes the story." Inside the modest office that Helen Markham had turned into temporary legal headquarters, Maya stood at the whiteboard. which was now covered in notes, names, dates, and red thread-like arrows that made the whole wall look like a crime procedural. Helen pointed at the newest addition, David J., the former groundskeeper. "He's agreed to testify," she said. He remembers seeing Sandra shredding documents in the North Annex. He also recalls her pulling a file labeled CD12, which matches Clara's ID code on the internal HR system. Maya exhaled slowly. "We're close. I can feel it." But it wasn't over, because even as the truth gathered momentum, the Gaines legal machine roared louder. On Wednesday morning, Maya received a notice in her mailbox. Another suit, this time alleging breach of a non-disclosure agreement she never signed. Helen read it, laughed without humor, and tossed it on her desk. They're flailing. It's desperation dressed in paperwork. Still, it shook Maya, because it meant that someone somewhere was still trying to silence her, still hoping she'd just walk away. But she wasn't built to run. That afternoon, Clara arrived again at Helen's office. This time with the sheet Amira had drawn on the one with the misallocated fund line. Helen held it up under a desk lamp. "This isn't just a doodle, this is a transaction record. A printed expense form from the foundation." She pointed to the bottom of the form. "There," she said. "Fund transfer, from discretionary account 779 amperes to project 42B, labeled as consulting services." Jules narrowed his eyes. "And 42B is?" Helen looked at Maya. "The Children's Scholarship Fund, the one Harold always bragged about." Maya sat back, stunned. "You're telling me he stole money from a kid's charity fund to pay someone off?" "That's what it looks like," Helen said. "Now we just need to know who was paid." Clara shifted uncomfortably. "When I was fired, Sandra told me. You should be grateful he didn't make you pay it back." Maya stiffened. "She said he?" Clara nodded. It was the first time the lines had blurred between Sandra's manipulation and Harold's approval. Until now, there'd always been a question. Was he complicit or just blind? This suggested complicity. Helen sat back and sighed. This could break him, if we prove it. But they still needed the paper trail. That night, Jules called Maya with a lead. "A friend of mine from college now works in digital archiving," he said. "Remember those destroyed documents David saw? The ones Sandra shredded? Apparently, some of the Gaines Foundation's internal systems auto-backup scanned receipts before final signatures." Maya leaned forward. "You think those files still exist?" "I think there's a chance." There. By morning, Maya, Jules, and Helen were sitting in a coffee shop across from a tall, nervous young woman named April. She wore an IT badge and had brought her own laptop. "I'm risking my job doing this," she said. "But my grandmother worked as a janitor until her knees gave out. So let's call this balance." April opened a protected file from an encrypted drive. There it was, a series of expense forms, quietly archived in the Foundation's system 2 days before Clara's termination. One of them showed a $10,000 payment labeled Employee Liability Resolution. The authorization code traced directly to Harold's executive login. April zoomed in. "See this?" she said. Sandra entered it, but Harold approved it. Maya's throat tightened. There it was. Proof that Harold not only knew about the misuse of funds, he signed off on it. Helen snapped photos, Jules took notes, and April encrypted a copy of the files to share with the district attorney. "It's done," Helen said as they exited the cafe. "We have everything we need." But Maya's mind wasn't at ease, because she knew they knew. That evening, as she walked home with Jordan's hand in hers, she noticed a car parked across the street. Not unusual. But it was there again an hour later when she went out for groceries. And again after dark. She drew her curtains tight. At 10:37 p.m., her phone rang. "Blocked number," she answered. A man's voice, low and unfamiliar. "You're getting in too deep." She didn't reply. "You think you're the hero? You're just collateral. If I were you, I'd take that little boy of yours and disappear." Click. Silence. Her hands shook, but she didn't cry. Instead, she wrote down every word. Then she called Helen, then Jules. They both told her the same thing. "Don't let them scare you. They're bluffing. But we'll put police detail on your building anyway." Maya looked over at Jordan. who slept peacefully with his stuffed bear tucked under his arm. She whispered, "I'm not going anywhere." The next morning, she met with the district attorney. They submitted every piece of evidence, every form, every timestamp, every shred of shredded truth. The wheels of justice were turning, and for the first time since she had walked into the Gaines estate, Maya didn't feel like the help. She felt like the storm. The morning air in Savannah was heavier than usual, thick with anticipation and the scent of turning leaves. The quiet charm of the city seemed almost deceptive now, like a painting hung over a fault line. Beneath its surface, power was shifting slowly, undeniably, and Maya Williams was at the center of it. At the courthouse steps, a crowd had gathered. Not a protest, not a rally, just people, neighbors, former employees, students, retirees standing shoulder to shoulder in silence. Some held signs. Justice for Clara. Dignity has no uniform. Truth is not defamation. Maya stood behind the tinted glass of a city van, peering out. Helen sat beside her, calm and composed, clutching a slim briefcase that contained everything they would need for the hearing that day. "They showed up," Maya murmured. Helen nodded. "They believe in what you've done." Maya's palms were damp. "What if the judge doesn't?" "Then we appeal," Helen said, "and appeal again, because the law isn't the final word, the truth is." Inside the courthouse, the air was cooler, clinical. The polished marble floors clicked beneath Maya's shoes as they made their way down the corridor. Reporters lined the halls, cameras flashing. Jules waited by the courtroom door, a folder tucked under one arm, his eyes scanning Maya's face. "You okay?" he asked. "No," she answered honestly, "but I'm ready." The courtroom was already half full. Harold Gaines sat at his usual table, dressed in a tailored navy suit, the American flag pin gleaming on his lapel like armor. His expression was unreadable, cold. He didn't glance her way. He didn't have to. His eyes were already on the judge's bench, calculating. Sandra Turner wasn't there. She had officially resigned the previous afternoon and was rumored to be negotiating a deal with prosecutors. The bailiff called order. The judge, a tall black woman with salt and pepper hair and a stern, intelligent gaze, entered and sat down. Her nameplate read, "Honorable Lena Braxton." "This court is now in session," the clerk announced. What followed was a meticulous unraveling. Helen presented the misallocated fund transfer first, then the forged check metadata, then April's digital archives. Each piece layered over the next, with surgical precision. Maya sat silent through it all, her hands clasped, her breathing slow and controlled. Then it was time for her testimony. She took the stand, raised her hand, swore the oath. Helen's voice was steady as she began. "Miss Williams, when did you first suspect financial misconduct within the Gaines Foundation?" Maya's voice, though soft, carried to the back of the room. "When I spoke to Clara Dorsey, after she was fired. Her story didn't add up. I trusted my instincts." "You? And did you act on those instincts?" "I did. I began collecting information files, copies, audio recordings. I contacted Jules Hawkins when I realized the scope of what was happening." Helen walked slowly across the room. "Were you ever compensated for your whistleblowing?" "No." "Did you do this for revenge?" "No. I did it for justice." Helen paused. "And for Clara?" Maya nodded. "For her, and every person like her who thought their voice didn't matter." The opposing counsel stood. His voice was colder, clipped. "Miss Williams, did you violate your employment contract by accessing internal files?" "No," Maya replied calmly. "I followed protocol. The files were not protected, and I had administrative clearance." "But you disseminated them, didn't you?" "I revealed evidence of criminal behavior," Maya said, locking eyes with him. "If that's dissemination, I accept the label." A few people in the gallery murmured approval. The lawyer frowned, but he didn't press further. When Maya stepped down from the witness stand, she felt lighter. Not because the weight was gone, but because she had finally set it down in front of the world. Then came the unexpected. Just as Helen was preparing closing remarks, the courtroom doors opened with a creak. A woman entered mid-50s, dignified, her face weathered with years of grace and grit. It was Harold's wife, Elaine Gaines. Whispers rippled through the room. Harold stiffened, His face betrayed something rare, unease. Elaine walked straight to the prosecution table, nodded at Helen, and handed over a sealed envelope. "I'd like to submit this as additional evidence," she said, voice calm but unmistakably resolute. The judge leaned forward. "On what grounds, Mrs. Gaines?" Elaine's gaze moved to her husband, then back to the bench. "Because I found it in the safe he thought I didn't know about, and because the truth should never be hidden by loyalty to a lie." A gasp echoed through the room. Helen opened the envelope carefully, revealing a ledger handwritten, with Harold's initials on each page. It detailed personal transfers, under-the-table settlements, and manipulation of donor funds. Maya's heart skipped. This was the endgame. Harold stood, sudden and sharp. "Your Honor, this is private marital." Judge Braxton raised a hand. "Sit down, Mr. Gaines." He obeyed, jaw clenched. After reviewing the ledger, the judge turned to the room. "This court finds sufficient grounds to proceed with a full criminal referral to the district attorney's office," she said. "Furthermore, this court dismisses the defamation case brought against Miss Maya Williams and Mr. Jules Hawkins. The evidence overwhelmingly supports the veracity of their claims." Silence, then applause. Real applause. In a courtroom, the judge didn't stop it. She allowed it. Outside, the crowd had doubled. Word spread fast. Maya stepped out, blinking into the sunlight. Microphones thrust forward. Reporters called her name. But this time, she didn't hide. She took the mic from Jules's hands, looked out at the sea of faces, young and old, brown and white, weary and hopeful. "I wasn't trying to be a hero," she said. "I just wanted to be heard." The crowd quieted, listening. "I'm not here because I'm brave. I'm here because someone else was afraid and I couldn't let that stand. Truth should not depend on your paycheck or your skin color. And dignity doesn't wear a uniform." Her voice cracked. "But justice belongs to all of us." The crowd erupted. Some people wept. Others clapped, shouted her name. Jordan appeared beside her, grinning, clutching her hand. And for the first time since all of it began, Maya allowed herself to smile wide, real, whole. She had not only survived the storm, she had become its voice. The morning after the courtroom victory, Savannah felt different, quieter somehow, like the air itself was taking a breath. The Gaines estate remained empty. The curtains drawn. The grand iron gate unmanned. A for sale sign had been slashed with red paint overnight. No one cleaned it up. No one cared. Maya awoke to find a line of letters slipped beneath her door, handwritten notes from strangers. One was from a retired school teacher, another from a janitor at City Hall. A third, scribbled in shaky penmanship, simply read, "Because of you, my daughter applied for a job she thought she'd never get. She said, if Miss Maya can speak up, so can I. Thank you." Maya held the letter to her chest. She wasn't used to being thanked. Not like this. Not for simply telling the truth. Later that morning, she and Jordan made their way to Monroe Park. The same path she had once walked with Amira, when a dollar felt like a lifeline. Now, children played on the swings. Retirees laughed beneath the oaks. And Clara was waiting at their usual bench. "I got the call," Clara said, as Maya sat down beside her. Maya looked at her. "From the DA?" Clara nodded, a mix of fear and relief in her eyes. "They're officially dropping all charges, expunging the record, and they're reopening the civil case for wrongful termination and emotional damages." Maya smiled. "That's justice." "No," Clara said softly, shaking her head. "You are justice." Amira came running up just then, clutching a tiny paper flag that someone had given her. "Mommy!" she shouted. "They're having a celebration at the church. They said your name." Clara's eyes shimmered. She pulled Amira close, then looked back at Maya. "I never thought I'd see this day." Neither had Maya. A few hours later, they walked to First Light Missionary Church, where Pastor Colton had organized a community day of dignity. The sanctuary had never been so full, people spilling out into the parking lot, music drifting into the street. Maya stood in the back at first, unwilling to take the spotlight, but Pastor Colton spotted her. "Come now, Sister Williams," he boomed into the mic, smiling wide. "You can't fight giants and then hide behind the choir." The crowd erupted in applause. Maya walked slowly to the front, each step echoing louder in her chest than on the floor. She didn't wear anything fancy, just a clean blouse and jeans. Still, she stood taller than she ever had. "You don't have to speak if you don't want to," Pastor Colton whispered gently. But she did. She walked to the podium and looked out not just at familiar faces, but new ones. Faces that had doubted her once. Faces that had ignored her. Faces that now listened. "I used to think the truth was something you whispered," she began, "that it was too fragile to survive the world. But I was wrong." She glanced down at Jordan, who smiled proudly from the front pew. "The truth," she continued, "isn't fragile. It's fire. And when you light it, even just a spark, it spreads." Someone in the back shouted, "Preach it, sister." Laughter, clapping. Maya smiled, the microphone trembling just slightly in her grip. This fight wasn't just mine. It belonged to Clara, to Amira, to every woman who was told to be quiet, to take what she was given and say, "Thank you. We are not disposable. We are not invisible. We are not for sale." The sanctuary rose in thunderous applause. Tears slid down Clara's face as she hugged Amira tighter. After the service, people lined up to speak with Maya. Some offered hugs. Others shared stories. A few just stood quietly, nodding, as if their presence said what words couldn't. That evening, Maya returned home and found a package at her door. Inside was a brand new children's bicycle, bright red, streamers on the handlebars, and a card that simply said, "For the girl who tried to sell her own bike to feed her mother, we saw you. We remember. We believe you now." It was unsigned. Maya's throat caught. She carried it inside and left it in the hallway, just staring at it. Jordan came running up. "Mommy? Is that for me?" She shook her head slowly. "No, baby. It's for someone else. Someone brave." She called Clara. When they arrived, Amira's eyes lit up. She touched the seat gently, reverently, like it was made of gold. "Is this mine?" she whispered. Maya nodded. It always was. The next day brought more movement. The district attorney's office filed formal criminal charges against Harold Gaines and Sandra Turner. Wire fraud, embezzlement, obstruction of justice. Harold's lawyer released a statement full of hollow denials and vague references to miscommunication. But no one listened anymore, because now the truth had names, dates, documents, and a woman who refused to stay silent. The city of Savannah began to change, too. The Gaines Foundation's assets were frozen. A new nonprofit formed from its remains, the Clara Fund, designed to support domestic workers, nannies, and low-income caregivers. Jules Hawkins agreed to serve on its board, but only under one condition: that Maya Williams be named Director of Community Outreach. Maya laughed when they told her. "I'm just a housekeeper," she said. "Exactly," Jules replied. "And that's why it has to be you." She didn't say yes at first. It took her a week. A walk through every old neighborhood she'd cleaned, every room she'd once tiptoed through quietly. Then she sat on the edge of her bed and whispered to the photograph of her grandmother, "I'm not small anymore." And she accepted. The first event she organized was held in a local library. She called it Truth in Uniform. Dozens of women showed up. Maids, janitors, cafeteria workers. Some wore their work clothes. Others brought kids. And all of them listened, as Maya spoke not as a survivor, but as a guide. When it was over, a woman with graying hair approached. "I cleaned Harold's yacht for 7 years," she said. "He once told me I was lucky to have a job. You showed him I wasn't lucky. I was valuable." Maya took her hand. "You still are." And as the sun set behind the library, Maya stepped outside and looked up at the sky. There was still work to be done, still stories to uncover, still battles to fight. But for the first time, she didn't feel alone. She felt ready. 6 months had passed. Savannah, ever steeped in Spanish moss and sun-dappled streets, had shifted in quiet ways. People held eye contact longer. Some store owners began offering free coffee to women in uniform. A mural appeared in the historic district, 3 women with tired hands and fierce eyes, standing shoulder to shoulder under the words, "Truth isn't fragile, it's fire." Maya didn't ask who painted it. She didn't need to. But life hadn't slowed. If anything, it had grown faster, more demanding. As director of community outreach for the Clara Fund, Maya's calendar was packed. Town hall meetings, resource fairs, legal clinics. She met with women every week, some silent, some angry, all carrying wounds they didn't always know how to name. And in between, she was still Jordan's mother, still cooking breakfast before sunrise, still folding laundry at midnight, still whispering prayers to the ancestors when no one was listening. On a gray Tuesday morning, Maya sat across from Pastor Colton in the back of the church, a fresh pot of coffee between them. "You've stirred up this town, Maya," he said, smiling. "Stirred it good." She laughed softly. "Wasn't trying to. Reckon that's why it worked," he replied, pouring her a cup. "When's the hearing?" "Next week," she said. "Federal court this time. Harold's team is trying to suppress the digital records, claiming privacy violations." Colton shook his head, still fighting the truth with shadows. Maya nodded. "But they're running out of shadows." He leaned forward. "How you holding up, baby girl?" She hesitated. "I'm tired, Pastor," she said honestly. "Not of the work. Just the weight of it." Colton reached across the table and placed a calloused hand over hers. "Justice don't come easy," he said, "but it's never wasted." That night, Maya returned home to find Jordan building a fort in the living room out of couch cushions and old bed sheets. "Look, Mommy," he shouted. "I made a castle." She sat on the floor beside him and crawled inside the tiny fort. "It's beautiful," she whispered, resting her forehead against his. Jordan tilted his head. "Are you sad?" "No, sweetheart. Just thinking." "About bad people?" "About brave people." He nodded sagely. "Like superheroes." She smiled. "Something like that." He leaned in close. "Are you one now?" Maya swallowed the lump in her throat. "Maybe, a little." The next morning brought more than court prep. Jules called with unexpected news. Elaine Gaines just agreed to a full on-camera interview. Maya sat upright. "You're kidding." "She wants to come clean. Said she's been living under a weight too. She's ready to talk about the safe, about the internal culture, about the cover-ups she witnessed firsthand." Maya's thoughts raced. "Will they let her?" "She doesn't care anymore," Jules said. "She's divorcing him." That night, Maya met Elaine in a quiet room at the local PBS station. Elaine looked different, lighter somehow. She wore no makeup. Her posture relaxed. The cameras were small, intimate, almost forgotten in the corner. "I stayed quiet for too long," Elaine began, her voice steady. "I told myself I didn't know enough to speak up. But the truth is, I didn't want to know. I didn't want to believe what I saw." Maya sat beside her, silent but present. Elaine continued, recounting story after story. How Harold manipulated donors, how Sandra enforced loyalty through fear, how Clara's firing had been discussed over dinner like a line item, how the ledger had always been kept in the second safe, the one only Elaine knew about. "I finally opened it after watching Maya on television," Elaine said, looking directly into the camera. "And I realized silence isn't noble. It's cowardice with good manners." The interview aired 3 days later. It wasn't loud or flashy, but it cut like truth always does, quiet, relentless, deep. By the end of the week, 3 new whistleblowers had come forward. 2 former accountants. 1 disgruntled executive assistant. Each had fragments of the same story. Harold Gaines was a fraud, and now it was all coming undone. Still, Maya stayed focused. There were community centers to visit, letters to answer, mothers to sit with in family court while they faced eviction. One evening, after a long clinic session, she returned home to find a small package at her door. Inside was a framed photograph. Her, Clara, and Amira at the mural downtown. A note was tucked inside. "To the woman who taught us that truth walks on 2 legs and scrubs floors. You changed more than a city. You changed us." No signature, just the words. She hung it above her kitchen table. Later that week, she and Jordan visited the cemetery where her grandmother was buried. Maya knelt by the gravestone, brushing away leaves. "I hope you're watching," she whispered, "because I finally found my voice." Jordan placed a toy truck on the stone. "This was mine, but now it's hers." Maya smiled, tears slipping down her cheek. In the months to come, she would testify in federal court. Harold Gaines would be convicted not just for fraud, but for systemic exploitation. Sandra Turner would accept a plea deal, her face never seen in public again. But those were headlines. The real story was here in the hands Maya held, in the rooms she entered, in the silences she helped break. Because truth didn't end in courtrooms. It began in living rooms, in laundromats, in quiet halls where women whispered, "If she did it, maybe I can too." And Maya never forgot. Not the pain, not the beginning, not the little girl who once tried to sell her bicycle to feed her mother, because that girl lived inside her still fierce, gentle, unbending, and now the world knew her name. The federal courthouse in Atlanta loomed large, not just in its neoclassical architecture but in the sheer gravity of what it had come to represent, a reckoning long overdue. Maya stood before its grand staircase, dressed in a simple black blazer, her hair pulled back, her shoulders squared. It was the same courthouse where civil rights giants once stood, the same courtroom where the law had often whispered, but rarely roared. Today, she hoped it would roar. Helen met her on the steps, legal pads tucked beneath one arm, calm as always. "You ready?" she asked. Maya glanced up at the building, then back down at her feet. "Do I have to be?" Helen smiled gently. "No, but you're here anyway. That's enough." Inside, security scanned them, cameras buzzed, and a familiar hush fell over the crowd as the court prepared to hear the final testimonies in the United States v. Harold M. Gaines. The seats were filled reporters, former employees, activists, and more than a few faces Maya had helped in the past year. They weren't just watching. They were witnesses. The federal prosecutor opened the day. He walked calmly to the jury, his voice level but pointed. "This case is not about a single transaction. It's not about one act of greed. It's about a pattern deliberate, sustained, and abusive against people whose labor made wealth possible, but who were never meant to share in it." Harold Gaines sat stiffly at the defense table, his once polished appearance dulled. His gaze flickered, never meeting Maya's. His wife was not present. Neither were his children. When the prosecution called Maya to the stand, the room seemed to still. She rose slowly, walked past the rows of strangers and allies, and took the oath. Then she sat down, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "Miss Williams," the prosecutor began, "can you tell us why you're here today?" Maya's voice was soft but clear. "Because I watched someone I cared about be destroyed to protect a lie. And I knew if I stayed quiet, I was part of that lie." The questions came methodically about documents, dates, voices recorded, policies ignored. Maya answered each one with calm precision. She didn't embellish. She didn't accuse. She simply told the truth. It was enough. When Helen cross-examined the defense's claims, she dismantled them like a surgeon, each falsehood peeled back with care and cold facts. When Harold's lawyer tried to discredit the witnesses, Helen stood with Maya's file in hand and read aloud from a letter. "I trusted him with my career, my future, my dignity," it read. "And he used my silence like a ladder." The letter was signed by a former HR manager, anonymous in court, but real enough to shake the jury. The final moments came quicker than expected. The prosecution offered closing remarks with a simplicity that silenced the room. This man thought his money could erase voices, but it didn't. It amplified them. Now, it's time to return dignity where it belongs. The jury took only 5 hours. Guilty, on all major counts. Maya didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. The courtroom buzzed with movement, murmurs, disbelief, but she remained still, her hands in her lap, her back straight. Later, in the courthouse hallway, Clara appeared at her side. Amira stood next to her, holding Maya's hand tightly. "He's really going to jail?" Clara asked, barely believing. Maya nodded. 10 years, minimum, maybe more. Clara looked away, emotions swirling behind her eyes. "I didn't think I'd live to see it." "You did more than see it," Maya said. "You helped make it happen." Down the hall, a reporter called Maya's name. "Miss Williams, how does it feel?" She turned, voice even. "It feels overdue." The story ran everywhere that evening. Former philanthropist found guilty in exploitation scheme. Black Maid's testimony sinks, Southern billionaire. Justice carried by the hands that used to clean his floors. But Maya didn't watch the news. She sat at home with Jordan on the couch, eating macaroni and cheese, cartoons flickering in the background. His head leaned on her shoulder, and she stroked his curls, grateful for the normal. Later that week, she returned to the church where it had all started. This time, not for a service but to teach. The Clara Fund had launched its first official leadership program for young women in service roles. Financial literacy, legal rights, workplace dignity. Maya led the first session. She stood before 15 women, aged 17 to 45, each with stories etched behind their eyes. "I'm not here to lecture," she said. "I'm here to listen. To learn alongside you. Because one day, someone's going to try to convince you that you are small, that you are replaceable, that silence is safer." She paused, "And I'm here to tell you, it's not. Your voice is not noise. It's a compass. Use it." They listened, and they believed her, because she didn't speak like a teacher. She spoke like someone who had bled for the lesson. That night, back in her modest apartment, Maya received a call from Jules. "You sitting down?" "I'm lying down," she chuckled. He laughed. "You're going to D.C. "What?" "The National Domestic Workers Alliance wants to honor you." "Maya, they're calling it the Legacy of Truth Award. You're the keynote speaker." Maya covered her mouth. "That's not real." "It is," Jules said. "You are." She sat up slowly, heart pounding, tears forming. I was just a maid." "The zebra." "No," he said. "You were a spark." As the phone call ended, she stood in front of her mirror. Not to adjust her hair, not to fix her clothes, but just to look at herself, to really see the woman who had been dismissed, underestimated, threatened, and who had refused to disappear. She placed a hand over her chest. "I am not what they called me," she whispered. Then she turned off the light. The ballroom at the Washington Hilton was dressed in velvet and light. Deep red curtains lined the stage, and above the podium, in bold silver letters, read, "Legacy of Truth, honoring voices that moved mountains." Maya stood behind the curtain, her palms damp, her heart louder than the jazz trio playing softly in the corner. Around her, the hum of conversation and clinking glasses echoed polished donors, seasoned activists, congresswomen in tailored suits, and quiet janitors in second-hand dresses, all gathered in the same room, all waiting for the same story. Hers. She felt out of place. Still carried the scent of bleach in her memory. Still remembered slipping off her shoes at the back of the Gaines mansion. Too tired to stand, but too afraid to sit. But she also remembered Clara, and Jordan, and every face she had met since the trial. The women who whispered, "Me too," at laundromats and courthouse bathrooms. The girl who followed her into the church lobby just to ask, "How did you do it?" A young staffer stepped beside her now, holding a small index card. "Miss Williams," she whispered, "you can take the stage after the senator's introduction." Maya nodded. "Thank you." Then, with a breath deeper than any she'd taken since childhood, she stepped out. Senator Evelyn Morrow greeted her with a proud smile. A woman of color herself, Evelyn took Maya's hand and held it for a moment longer than protocol allowed. "You didn't ask for a podium," Evelyn said into the microphone, "but you earned it anyway." The room erupted in applause. Maya stepped up slowly, the stage lights warm against her skin, her reflection caught in the glasses of 200 powerful people and more watching on the live stream around the country. She didn't read from a speech. She didn't need to. "I used to think the world only saw what I did," Maya began. "How I scrubbed, folded, swept, that my worth ended when I clocked out, but I was wrong." She looked out over the room. "They saw me. They just didn't hear me, until I refused to stay quiet." She shared how the injustice started with Clara, but how it didn't end there. How it ran through entire systems that were designed to reward silence, to make dignity optional, to price worth by the hour. "I didn't want revenge," she said, her voice steady, firm. "I wanted recognition. For every woman who wakes up at 4 a.m. to clean someone else's success. For every mother who gives up her dinner so her child can eat. For every person who was told, 'Stay in your place.'" She paused. "I found my place. It was behind the truth." More applause, but not loud, not wild. It was reverent, like church, like acknowledgement. After the event, guests swarmed the reception, asking for photos, quotes, hugs. Maya stood with a glass of water, overwhelmed, but composed. Elaine Gaines approached quietly. She wore a simple navy dress and flats. No entourage, no makeup. "Maya," she said. Maya turned, unsure what to expect. Elaine offered her a folded piece of paper. "It's my full deposition," she said. "Everything I never testified to. Names, dates, foundations. It's not just Harold. It never was." "Ugh." Maya took it, surprised. "Why me?" Elaine's eyes watered. "Because you didn't burn the house down, Maya. You built one. And maybe now, I can finally help." That night, back in her hotel room, Maya tucked Jordan into bed. He had come to DC too, dazzled by the hotel's glass elevators and chocolate mints on pillows. She kissed his forehead and sat by the window, the city lights glowing like distant stars. She opened Elaine's envelope. Inside was a list of foundations, grant recipients, and payoffs that stretched far beyond Savannah, DC, Miami, Chicago, quiet settlements, suppressed cases, familiar names. It wasn't over. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something bigger. The next morning, she called Jules. "We've got more," she said. "Much more. You sure you want to keep going?" he asked. "You could stop. You could finally rest." "I could," she said, "but I didn't come this far to sit in silence while someone else is next." Jules was quiet for a moment, then replied, "I've already cleared my calendar." Days later, Maya stood before a new group of women, this time in a community center in Detroit. A former nanny had flown in from Boston. A cafeteria worker had driven 9 hours just to speak with her. They didn't come for inspiration. They came for strategy. And Maya gave it to them. She taught them how to file requests, how to track time cards, how to document harassment, how to speak in court. She gave them the tools that had once been denied to her. At the end of the session, one of the women asked, "What if no one listens?" Maya smiled. "Then say it louder." That became their motto. Say it louder. They put it on t-shirts, on flyers, on signs posted in break rooms. It was more than a phrase. It was a promise. In the months that followed, Maya would testify before Congress. She'd meet with labor unions, join policy committees, and build something she once thought unimaginable. A national database of reported abuses against domestic workers, accessible, anonymous, and protected. But through it all, she never left Savannah for long. Because her roots were there. Because Clara was still there. Because the little girl who once whispered, "Mommy hasn't eaten in 2 days," still lived on that street where Maya had first seen her. And because Jordan needed home. Home, not as a building but as a place where dignity was ordinary. Where justice didn't need applause. Where truth was not a weapon but a light. A year after the trial, the city of Savannah unveiled a new plaque near the courthouse. It read, "In honor of those who refused to stay silent, may their truth echo louder than any lie." At the unveiling, Maya stood in the crowd, unseen, unannounced. She didn't need a microphone anymore. She had passed the torch, and the fire was still burning. The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains of Maya's kitchen as the smell of cinnamon toast filled the air. Jordan sat at the table, his legs swinging under his chair, focused intently on coloring a picture of a rocket ship. Maya poured herself a cup of coffee, savoring the warmth in her hands. It had become a ritual now, 10 minutes of quiet before the storm of emails, calls, and strategy meetings took over her day. But today was different. Today, she was meeting someone she never thought she would see again. Clara arrived just after 10. She looked radiant, stronger, with a confidence Maya hadn't seen before. Amira held her hand, her curls tied up in bright pink barrettes, her smile wide. "I brought donuts," Clara said, lifting the box. "It's a peace offering, for dragging you into all this mess." Maya laughed and opened the door wider. "Girl, please. We lit that fire together." They sat at the kitchen table like they used to. The past rising in soft waves between them, not as ghosts, but as proof. Amira ran off to play with Jordan, and the two women sat quietly for a moment, watching the children. "I'm thinking about starting a nonprofit," Clara said at last. "For domestic workers, mental health support, Emergency housing, legal help. Maya raised an eyebrow. That's big. I'm tired of surviving, Clara said. I want to build, like you did. No. Maya reached over and squeezed her hand. Then let's do it together. By the following week, the vision was taking shape. They called it Rooted, a nod to the legacy of women who had worked in silence, to the strength found beneath the surface, to everything that had been planted in struggle and bloomed in resistance. Rooted launched with 3 volunteers, a borrowed office in the back of a church, and one mission: no woman in uniform would ever feel alone again. Maya brought in Jules to help structure the board. Clara tapped into her network from decades in the caregiving world. The stories came pouring in. A housekeeper fired after 15 years without severance. A live-in nanny who had never once received overtime. A hospice aide who'd been sleeping in her car. Maya sat across from each of them, her notebook open, her heart steady. She didn't flinch at their pain. She just listened and showed them how to fight back. One night, after a full day of intake sessions, Maya and Clara stayed late at the office. The walls were still bare, the chairs mismatched, but the air crackled with purpose. You ever get scared? Clara asked as she filed away another intake form. Every day, Maya replied. But I stopped letting it make my decisions. Clara nodded slowly. I still dream about that day. You remember? In the basement, when we heard them talking upstairs. Maya's gaze drifted. I remember. Clara shook her head. I almost didn't tell you. I almost just packed up and left. But you didn't, Maya said. And because of that, thousands of women now have a place to go. They sat in silence, the hum of the overhead lights filling the space between them. Then Clara said something Maya never expected. You should run. Maya blinked. Run? For office, local council, or even state. You've already got half the city listening. Maya laughed, but it caught in her throat. I'm not a politician. Neither were you an activist, Clara said, but look where you are now. The idea haunted her in the days that followed. Not in a bad way. Like a door she hadn't realized existed cracked open, light spilling out. Could she? Would people trust her? Would they see her as more than just the maid who made noise? She didn't tell anyone at first. Just let the thought simmer. Then, one Saturday, she took Jordan to the farmer's market. As they walked past a stand of fresh peaches, a woman stopped her. You're Maya Williams, right? Maya turned. Yes. The woman reached into her tote bag and pulled out a flyer, Rooted's latest printout. My sister works in Charleston, she said. They posted this in her staff room. She called me crying. Said she never thought someone like her mattered. Said she finally felt seen. Maya's eyes stung. The woman placed the flyer in Maya's hand. You're already leading, she said. Might as well make it official. That night, Maya sat at her desk long after Jordan had gone to sleep. She pulled out a blank piece of paper and, at the top, wrote, Maya Williams for Savannah City Council. She stared at it for a long time. Then she smiled. 6 weeks later, the announcement went live. Jules helped with the website. Clara managed outreach. Pastor Colton agreed to deliver the invocation at her first rally. When reporters asked about her platform, Maya kept it simple. Dignity is policy. Her campaign wasn't flashy. No big donors. No glossy mailers. But it was real. Neighborhood meetings in skull gyms. Listening circles in laundromats. Flyers on the doors of apartment buildings. She didn't campaign in high heels. She wore sneakers. And she walked block by block, shaking hands, listening to stories, promising only what she knew she could give. Her word, her fight, her presence. Election day arrived with an autumn chill in the air. Maya dropped Jordan off at school, then cast her vote at the local rec center. She didn't wait around the polling place. She went back to Rooted, sat with Clara, and kept answering calls. Because regardless of the outcome, women still needed help. That night, the results came in. She won, by 62 votes. Not a landslide, but enough. Enough to pull a chair to the table she'd once cleaned under. The council chamber smelled of old wood and ink. Rows of polished chairs lined the center aisle. And overhead, portraits of past council members stared down, almost all men. Almost all white. Their gazes framed in gold leaf and institutional pride. Maya adjusted her blazer as she stepped into the chamber for the first time, not as a visitor, not as an aide, but as an elected official. City Councilwoman Maya Williams. The title still felt strange on her tongue. But the weight of it? That, she had worn for years. She walked past the portraits, past the curious stares and polite nods, and took her seat second from the left, between Councilman Reeves, a 72-year-old war veteran with sharp eyes, and Councilwoman Diaz, a firebrand known for her booming voice and relentless advocacy. They both leaned in as she settled. "You ready?" Diaz asked with a smile. Maya looked straight ahead. Born ready. The meeting began with ceremonial niceties. Minutes approved. Proclamations read. The mayor welcomed Maya formally, her name entered into the record. Then came the real business, and Maya's first moment to speak. A proposal had been submitted by the Chamber of Commerce new zoning laws that would beautify the east side of Savannah. On paper, it looked harmless, promising green spaces and development grants, but Maya had read between the lines. It was a cloak for displacement, an eviction plan dressed as progress. She pressed the microphone button in front of her. "I have concerns," she began. Her voice rang clear through the speakers. Heads turned. According to the city's own records, over 60% of the residents in the proposed area are senior citizens. Most have lived there for over 30 years. "We're not beautifying the community. We're bulldozing their history." Councilman Reeves raised an eyebrow. "You're suggesting we stall the entire development project?" "I'm suggesting we listen to the people who will be most affected," Maya replied. "And they're not in this room. They're packing their bags, wondering where they'll go next." Murmurs echoed. Diaz leaned toward her, whispering, "You sure know how to start strong." After the session ended, reporters flooded the exit. One stuck a mic near her face. "Councilwoman Williams, is it true you plan to challenge current redevelopment policy?" Maya didn't blink. "I plan to challenge anything that punishes people for being poor." She didn't wait for follow-ups. She turned, picked up her bag, and walked straight to her car, her steps calm but certain. The next week was a whirlwind. Articles, panels, messages pouring into Rooted from constituents. But not all of them were kind. "You're making enemies," Jules warned over the phone one night. "They were never friends," she replied. By the end of the month, Maya had organized a public forum at a local community center. Folding chairs filled quickly. Retirees, single mothers, veterans, and small business owners showed up, many of them holding handwritten notes, afraid of losing homes they'd lived in for decades. Maya took the stage, not as a politician, but as one of them. "I know what it's like to feel invisible," she said, "to have decisions made about your life without your voice in the room. But not tonight. Tonight, this room belongs to you." One by one, people rose to speak. An elderly man with a cane said he'd been in his home since 1968. A mother of 4 explained how her rent had doubled in under 2 years. A teen stepped up and simply said, "I don't want my grandma to be forced out, so we can get a frozen yogurt place." Maya listened to them all, took notes, asked questions, promised follow-ups, and she kept every one of those promises. When the vote came down 2 weeks later, she stood again before the council. "I move to reject the zoning proposal as written," she said, "and to initiate a community-led review process." The room stilled. Reeves hesitated, then slowly nodded. "Seconded." They voted, and won. It wasn't flashy. No headlines, no national buzz. But on that quiet Thursday night, families on Savannah's east side slept easier. That same week, Maya received an invitation from the governor's office. A statewide task force on fair housing and tenant protection was being formed. They wanted her voice at the table. She showed the letter to Clara at Rooted, both of them sitting on milk crates because their donated chairs still hadn't arrived. "You're moving up," Clara said. Maya shrugged. "Feels more like digging in." Clara raised her coffee cup. "To deeper roots. To louder voices," Maya said, tapping hers to it. But even with political victories and expanding influence, Maya never let go of her grassroots ties. She still made late-night home visits, still brought groceries to elders, still read to kids at the shelter. And one evening, after a particularly long day of hearings, she walked Jordan down to the old park. The swing sets had been repainted, the benches repaired. A mural of community heroes now lined the far wall, and somewhere in the center, a small portrait of a girl with curls, holding a bicycle. Amira, drawn by a local artist, painted from memory. Jordan stared up at it, eyes wide. "Mommy," he said, That's her, the girl from your story. Maya knelt beside him. That's right. She gave up her bike so her mommy could eat. Maya nodded, her throat tight. Was that real? He asked. Maya looked at the mural, at the quiet power in those painted eyes. Yes, baby, she said. It was very real. And in her heart, Maya knew the story wasn't over. Because as long as there were voices still silenced, still dismissed, still pushed aside, there was work to do. There always would be. The church was full. Sunlight poured through the stained glass windows, casting golden hues on the wooden pews. The scent of pine-scented floor polish lingered beneath the aroma of fresh cornbread and collard greens being prepared for the lunch gathering downstairs. Maya sat in the second row, Jordan beside her, swinging his legs as the choir warmed up behind the pulpit. She wasn't speaking today. She wasn't organizing or testifying or leading a workshop. Today, she was just Maya. Daughter, mother, neighbor, and somehow, despite everything, still whole. Pastor Colton stepped up to the podium, tapping the microphone gently. This morning, before we moved to the message, he said, voice deep and warm, we want to recognize someone who's reminded us what faith in action looks like. Maya blinked in surprise. Colton smiled toward her. Maya Williams, please stand. The room erupted in applause. She rose slowly, unsure of what to do with her hands. The pastor continued, this sister here went from cleaning houses to cleaning up City Hall, from whispering truth to shouting it from podiums. But more than that, she reminded us that the greatest titles we hold are the quiet ones. Neighbor, mother, sister, friend. A small girl in the front row clapped with wide eyes. Someone in the back shouted, we love you, Maya. She smiled and nodded, sitting again as the music swelled. Later, during lunch in the church basement, people formed a quiet line just to hug her. Some gave her notes, others pressed her hands with thanks, and still others offered stories of their own battles. She listened to each one, never rushing. In the corner, Jordan shared his mashed potatoes with Amira, now 6, her curls longer but her energy just as boundless. Clara sat nearby, talking with one of Rooted's new volunteers, a retired librarian who'd driven in from Augusta to help build their first mobile resource van. Across the room, Jules waved at her from behind a tray of sweet tea. He approached with a grin. You're practically royalty now. Don't start, she said, chuckling. Next thing I know, I'll be on a postage stamp. Wouldn't be the worst idea, he said. As the meal wound down, Maya slipped outside for air. The sky was soft with clouds, autumn beginning to kiss the tops of the trees. She walked slowly to the community bulletin board nailed to the church fence. Flyers overlapped like petals announcements for tutoring programs, food drives, job fairs, and in the middle, printed in bold black, Maya's listening circle every second Thursday. Come as you are. She hadn't made the flyer herself. Someone else had printed it, posted it. That meant more to her than any award. Later that week, Maya sat at her kitchen table, sorting through letters. Not emails, not texts, but handwritten letters. Dozens of them, from women in Baton Rouge, Portland, Tulsa. From a janitor in Detroit who'd won a discrimination case after attending one of her trainings. From a nursing assistant in Alabama who used Roothead's resources to start a union vote in her facility. One letter stopped her cold. It came from a teenage girl in Brooklyn. The handwriting was neat, but the message raw. My mom was a cleaner like you. She died before she could fight back. I'm going to law school now. Because of you. You showed me we don't have to stay quiet. Maya folded the letter gently, placed it in a small wooden box where she kept the ones that hit hardest. The next morning, she and Jordan rode the bus downtown together. She'd insisted on public transit that day. It grounded her. Reminded her. He leaned against her side, half asleep. Mama, he murmured. When I grow up, can I be like you? She stroked his head. You can be whoever you want. He nodded. I want to help people feel strong. Her eyes brimmed, but she didn't let the tears fall. You already do, she whispered. At City Hall, she passed through security, nodded to the receptionist, and walked into her office, still modest, still shared, still filled with hand-drawn cards from neighborhood kids, taped to the walls. She sat at her desk and flipped open her notebook. At the top of the page, she'd written a new initiative, Savannah Fair Work Act, first draft. It was ambitious, guaranteed sick leave, protections for domestic workers, safe reporting procedures for abuse. Most said it would never pass. But then again, they'd said that about everything she'd done. So she picked up her pen and began. That afternoon, a young intern entered her office. Barely 20, wide-eyed, full of questions. "Miss Williams," she said softly, "do you really think we can change the whole system?" Maya smiled. "Not overnight," she said, "but brick by brick, yes." The girl nodded, then hesitated. "Can I stay late today? I want to help." Maya's heart swelled. "Pull up a chair," she said. "Let's get to work." And outside, the city hummed. Not with protest, not with panic, but with quiet determination, because something had shifted. Not just laws, not just headlines, but hearts, homes, whole neighborhoods. Because a woman once dismissed as invisible had stood up and refused to stay that way, and in doing so, she made space for others to rise. Not just to survive, but to lead, to thrive, to speak, and to be heard. Always.